Okay, well, welcome everybody. Sorry, we just switched to broadcast and we're waiting for everybody to Zoom in or log in, however you say it. I'm Nancy Guerra. You probably know me, or, well, nice to meet you if you don't. And I'm here with Susan Charles, who is our wonderful faculty health psychologist, clinical psychologist. We're super happy to have her here today. We're going to wait a couple of minutes while people are logging in. And an interesting chat that Susan and I were having beforehand that we'll kind of resume so you can hear it. I asked her, what is a senior these days? You know, is it a chronological age? Does it differ in different countries? Does it differ historically? So I don't know, Susan, maybe you could talk a little bit about what actually is a senior.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think most people think of the Social Security age that was first established in the 1930s of being 65. That's something we borrowed from the German Republic. And it was set there because so few people made it over 65. Only about 4 or 5% of the population was 65 and older, so we could afford to pay to pay for Social Security. And that was kind of an arbitrary age. And it continues to be an arbitrary age. Different countries set retirement in different ages. So in America, it really is at 65, even though the truth is most people retire earlier than that. But in China, for example, it's 60 for men, it's 55 for women. In Italy, it's also lower for women and about, I think, 55 and 60, which is kind of ironic because women generally have jobs that are less physically demanding and women generally live longer than men. So it's interesting, these different countries have different age sets for men and women, but so it varies across different cultures and across different places. In America, people are living longer and healthier than ever before. So we've now even divided the older age groups into the young old, which is 65 to 75, and the mid old, which is 75 to 85, and then the old, which is over 85. But it really is arbitrary. I mean, age is a proxy. When we say there are age differences, what are we talking about? And so, you know, what does age mean? Age is just a placeholder, a name that signifies differences in health, differences in a culture of like what music you like to listen to based on when you were born and what was popular when you were young. So age is very much a relative term.
Well, because we're talking about supporting seniors and we're really going to talk about the different kinds of health issues and the different healths, it seems like we need to have some conversation about is your senior status based on your physical health? Is it based on your mental health, your cognitive health? Or is chronological age a good enough proxy that we can use that and maybe modify it a little bit? I was just telling a funny story also before, and I think we have pretty much everybody here. When I was driving down PCH and there was a sign that said in Dana Point, "We love our seniors." And I thought, oh, we're doing a thing on senior health. How nice that they love the seniors. And then I realized it was our college, our high school seniors, our graduating seniors. So a different kind of senior. Anyhow, why don't we begin? I think we have everybody here. So welcome, Dr. Charles. We're really happy to have you here in our third Parkside chat. These have been very successful. We hope that you've had a chance to watch the video, the Q&A that Susan and I did in the park, or well, on campus in an area that looks like a park. But for those of you who haven't had a chance, or just for a recap, I'm going to ask Susan to just kind of give us a little summary of what are some of the ways that we can support seniors and particularly support health during the COVID-19 crisis. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nancy. So yeah, just to give you all an overview, when we talk about health for seniors, so people over 65 or along the age, the adult lifespan, we don't just think of health as absence of disease. So health becomes a much broader term. So we were speaking in the park about emotional health, which is our mental health and our levels of happiness and feeling good. We talked about our cognitive health, so the way we think and making sure that we think clearly and our memory and all our executive functioning is working well, and so how cognitively healthy we are. We look at our physical health, of course, and so especially with this pandemic, the the concerns about our physical health are looming very largely right now. And I added another one that I usually don't discuss, but it's financial health. And I just wanted to do that because more and more people are at home and they're near their phone, and just wanted to alert people of how fraudsters often target older adults to call and to try to take their money. And so I wanted to talk, so I spoke a little bit in the video about ways we can kind of try to monitor that and keep our older adults safe from scams.
So can you give us a little kind of overview of ways that we can support seniors in each of those healths?
Yes, so it's interesting with this pandemic. Of course, we have both a short game, which is keeping them immediately healthy right now and safe, and we have a long game, which is our health is a lifelong process, and we want to make sure that what we're doing is setting up good behaviors for the long haul. So, for example, for physical health, right now, what's most important is to protect older adults from exposure to the virus, and so that is absolutely on point and the number one most important thing we can do. At the same time, we have to look at the longer game, which really cardiovascular health is so vitally important for healthy aging. And so if we have older adults who should remain inside, who haven't left their house, we need to make sure that there's still ways that they can exercise and help maintain cardiovascular fitness, maintain their strength, and maintain their physical health, making sure they're taking their medications, making sure that they're getting refills on prescriptions, that if they can't go out, making sure that that happens, making sure they're eating healthy. So the physical health is something we need to be aware of. Their mental well-being, making sure that they're getting social support and they're hearing from their loved ones and they're feeling integral and needed at this time is very vital for emotional health. Cognitive health, staying very active and keeping your brain active and engaged in activities that ideally, activities that where you have to really think and learn something new, so use your memory. So Craig Stark at UCI showed that video games, actually, we think of them as games that only young people play, that video games actually are very good for the mental health of older adults, so keeping their cognition healthy. And then the financial health, making sure that they don't fall for these scams that are prevalent, unfortunately, in our society.
And are we seeing much more significant impact with the older old than with the younger old? You know, people in nursing homes, or would you further distinguish in terms of being extra cautious? Is it a graduated kind of, you have to be pretty cautious for 65 and super cautious for 85? I know in nursing homes we're seeing the highest rates of death.
Yes, that's a really good question, and COVID-19 is really, in America, it really has uncovered all of our vulnerabilities, and so it really takes out what is most vulnerable. And so people who are living in hospitals or hospital-like settings or in skilled nursing facilities where they need someone to help them with their health care are the most vulnerable physically. And so they're the ones that are the most likely to suffer the consequences of a horrible virus. So so the sicker you are, the more vulnerable physically you are. And that's often correlates with age, but it's not caused by age. So you can be, I've seen people in nursing homes who are 47 years old. I've seen people run marathons who are 78 years old. And so it really depends on their physical frailty and vulnerability. And unfortunately, a lot of vulnerability increases with age.
Well, and I'm wondering if for people, for example, who have older parents in the older old group, but who aren't in nursing homes, if they might really, I like all the kind of thinking about the four healths, if they might find a way to really develop a plan, like a very specific, tailored plan for coping. So an exercise plan, because I find it's kind of like when people have specific goals, it makes it easier. And it could be something as simple as walk up 10 steps or lift your leg 10 times, and then the children could give it to the parents or the grandparents, or people could do it for themselves. Because it seems like one of the problems with the pandemic and with our stay-at-home orders is you kind of do lose a sense of time and organization and routine activities. So maybe there'd be a way to put this into some routine activities.
Well, that's a really good point, especially for physical health. So with people, especially over age 85 or who are more frail, we lose our muscle mass a lot faster every decade. And once you get over 75 and over 85, we have something called a reserve capacity, and we have our functional capacity. And so when you're younger, you can have friends say, hey, let's go out and run a couple miles. And you say, sure, let's do that. Or help me lift this couch, and you can lift a couch. So what you do every day is you're functional. So you lift your glass of water, and you don't really lift more than 5 pounds or 10 pounds, I don't know, every day. But your reserve capacity allows you to lift 2 or 3 times what you normally would do, or run away from a car, even if you're not a runner, right? You can do twice as much as your normal. As you get older, you lose that reserve capacity, and so you often can't go beyond what you do every single day. And so the older you get, the more reserve capacity you lose. And so, for example, if you're in your late 80s and you're starting to lose muscle capacity and you're not doing exercise, even lifting cans, you can lift a can, but can you lift a slightly bigger can and you grow in your cupboard from your or out of your refrigerator? You might not be able to. So even exercises, for example, if you don't have weights, which a lot of people might not have, even taking cans of food and using them as weights, that would be great for older people. Or even if they find it kind of hard to get out of a chair, doing exercises that work on getting out of chairs and sitting down and standing up. We think of that as not intense exercise, but those are goals that older people should be kind of focused on.
Well, and I've heard a lot of people say how hard it is not to just sit down and turn on Netflix or something. It's awfully tempting. Somehow we equate being home with relaxing and not doing things, and it kind of overtakes you. So I think that would be important for all of us. I mean, I truly believe that the best strategy, or one of the best strategies for preventing illness, is to promote wellness and to really get healthy. And I know a lot of people have used this as an opportunity to eat healthy, to exercise more, to sleep better, to try to really take care of yourself, since you have a little more time and we have less stress that we have to deal with. So I think at any age, in senior life, you can always get healthier than you are, whatever it is. And maybe it's a chance to start a rest of life commitment to being healthy, which also builds your immune system, which also makes you less likely to get infected. Well, let me ask you another question, and then we'll go to our Q&A here. So please, those of you who are watching, send us some questions in the Q&A. You talked about social support. And I know I've heard stories of people whose parents are in nursing homes in particular, or ill, going to the window and just standing at the window like this, kind of talking. And I know one person who said her mom kept saying, come in, come in, come in. And she didn't understand why she couldn't come in. But I wonder, particularly for people who aren't fluent in technology, not every senior knows how to do Zoom or how to use the internet, although I've been surprised at how many older people I see on their iPhones or their phones. What would you suggest? What are some ideas for social support that you could suggest that maybe don't require technology? Are there things you could do? Could you do 6 feet apart in the park talking, or?
No, absolutely. As the social distancing orders become clearer and clearer, so maintain that social distance, but having that connection is absolutely wonderful. And so as much as is healthy for you and your circumstance to do, absolutely would be great. And even opening the window in a nursing home so people can talk through the window and have the six feet. People not understanding why are we doing this, that probably isn't older adult who has some memory loss and maybe has a type of dementia that's preventing them from really understanding and learning. And that might be frustrating every time going to someone who has memory loss and kind of reminding them that this is important for their health. So but any way you can stay connected, even if you would rather have Zoom because you want a connection, if older people might feel more comfortable with the telephone, especially if they have memory loss, telephones, just because that feels more comfortable to them, might surprisingly be a better method than Zoom.
And you've actually answered. I was looking at the Q&A. We have a specific question, which is, technology is a great way to keep up with family without seeing them in person, but my grandparents don't understand technology very well. This is the flip side. Is it time to get seniors caught up on technology? Is it possible to do while we're social distancing, to teach them how to use Zoom or Alexa? Can Alexa get you on Zoom?
Well,
I don't know the technology.
It's really interesting. And so we have, across the country, prior to the pandemic, there were a lot of senior centers that offered help in technology and learning technology. And there are certainly 90-year-olds who are using technology like old pros who are better at it than I am. And then there's people who are, in their 60s who aren't good at it at all. And so there are YouTube videos that help people understand technology. So it really depends.
They have to understand technology to get on YouTube.
Right. And so you can try to talk them through it on the telephone if you have the patience and are willing to work. And it really depends on how much technology they've had in the past. So if there's someone who's 65 years old, 20 years ago, they're 45, and so they probably used technology for a longer time. The older they are, the less probably familiar with technology they have. So it really depends on their prior experience, but it's always good to try, but not to be too frustrated if it gets too complex.
Well, and I want to pick up on something on the phone, because I know a lot of seniors, and a lot of, like, my mom always preferred talking on the phone. She could barely get the TV to work, and she'd get it off the cable and have to call the cable guy like twice a week. But, that kind of relates to the whole financial risk and financial health. I know we were talking in the video about how seniors who are lonely are such easy prey for people who try to be their friend on the phone and tell them one thing or the other, and then they wind up giving them their credit card or giving them their PIN number or something like that. So what would you advise people in terms of dealing with potential for financial fraud? And I know a lot of seniors myself who've been impacted, who've fallen prey to this, including my father-in-law, mentioned in the video, who died, I think $30,000 in debt because every good deal, and someone would just talk to him, be nice to him. Oh, it's so great to hear from you. They're so kind. Some of the trick might be just call your parents or grandparents a lot to engage them. But what would you recommend to protect against financial
No,
fraud?
I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. And your story about your grandfather about your father-in-law talked a lot about the research. It was like a perfect example of all this research. Older people are, obviously, you can fall prey to fraudsters at any age. So it's not something reserved just to being old. However, what we know is that people generally seek out older people to prey upon. And also that older people are generally more trusting of strangers than younger people. They're also more likely to pick up their phone if they don't recognize the origin of the call. They're still more likely to pick up that phone than younger people. So they're more vulnerable to getting in contact with fraudsters, with picking up the phone, with talking to these people. They're more trusting when they talk to these people. And another thing that, two other issues that might make them more vulnerable is if they're lonely, these people talk to them. And so if they're not getting phone calls from their family, or they have a lot of hours where there's no one they're talking to another voice and someone who acts like they care about them and who are interested in them and think and have conversations with them is something that they enjoy. And so often people will call them and get conversations with them and form real relationships with these people. And And that's another way that then they talk them out of their money or convince them. They'll talk about a great way to help other people to get at their empathy, because older people are also compassionate. They like to give back. And so they could say, we have this wonderful, we're raising funds for a wonderful cause. It could be a cause that's really near and dear to their heart, like saving animals or homeless, or for firemen funds or police officer funds. And then they'll take their money. So the two most common people they prey upon are actually older, well-educated white males, and older women who actually have very little money. And they try to get them to send like $100 or $200 and try and do that on a regular basis. So it's not always the rich that fall prey.
So it sounds like one strategy that really kind of checks multiple boxes is to talk with older people regularly, have some kind of social support. If it's, for yourself, be involved in Zoom happy hours and ways that you connect with people and you engage. If it's your parents or your grandparents, make sure you call them. I know I used to call my mom every day at 5. And like, sometimes she'd say, hey, it's 5 after 5, you're late. So I knew she was like looking forward to, she was watching the clock, probably from 4 o'clock till 5 o'clock, waiting till I called. And sometimes we don't realize how important that is for people in their life. And that would make them less likely to just be, talk to anybody who they could. But what about things like, putting a limit on their credit cards or not allowing them to have PIN numbers? Does that kick in at some point in time, or is that not recommended?
Well, that's a hard one. That's a very hard one. Yeah. Well, first, just to follow up what you said, talking to them a lot and asking them, who'd you talk to today? So how'd you have any good conversations? And then they also might, if they're talking to someone about giving money, they also might drop hints like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to give money to someone who needs it? And you could say, yeah, absolutely. And you could even talk to them about ideas that you might have, and they might come up with a crazy one. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Where did that come from? So really get them, so talk to them about who they're having conversations with and their thoughts about this. But going to managing their finances, some people are, as they get older and they realize maybe they want some oversight, or maybe they realize they're having some memory problems, they will sign over control to their family members, and they will allow them to monitor and to have a legal relationship where they can check their credit and information. Some really do not, even when they have memory problems, and then you have to get legal intervention to protect them, and that's very difficult. So it really depends on how willing an older adult is to let you in on their finances.
Well, that's good advice. Let me kind of look at some of the other questions now on slightly different topics, but related. One of our viewers asked, how will we know when a senior is sad or depressed? Because it seems like we all show it differently.
No, that's a great question, because even major depressive disorder looks very different among about people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s than it does in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. So for young people, they express their major depression with extreme negative emotion. So they might talk about feeling hopeless or really upset or very angry. These are all signs of depression that we see in young adults. Older adults, we don't see high levels of this intense negative emotions. Instead, what you see is a lack of positive emotions, which you also see with younger people sometimes, but for older people, that's the dominant presentation. So they might not say, I'm feeling hopeless or I'm feeling really upset, but they will, but if you ask them about, what's happened that's made them happy in the last couple of days or last 2 weeks, they will say, oh, nothing, just kind of boring. And when you see that lack of positive affect, that is a warning sign for older people, even more for younger people. So often without this intense negative, people think, oh, they're fine, when actually it's just their depression expresses very differently.
Well, and that leads to another question, actually, and a kind of broader issue is, what do we do? I mean, the specific question is, my grandmother is in a nursing home and getting seriously depressed. She is constantly by herself. Other than visiting her, which you have to do through a glass window, what's the way I can lift up her spirits? And I think that's a broader question that people might have. What do we do when older people, we realize they're depressed? Do they take medication? Do we take them to a telehealth counselor? What would you recommend doing?
Well, if they're suddenly getting depressed within the last 2 or 3 weeks or 2 months, it really seems like it's an environmental reason. And I don't know individual people, but if all of a sudden they're depressed because of social isolation, it's because of social isolation and not a physical reason, which is 50% of all depression over the age of 65 is because of a physiological medication side effect or disease side effect. So, I mean, that's something that needs to be looked at. But if it's something that really coincided with the pandemic, it's probably an environmental cause. And for those, we know that what's very important for people's well-being is that they engage in pleasurable events and that they have positive relationships and that they feel important and needed. So for example, people need to feel needed, asking their advice about something. So if they fixed cars when they were, that was their career, asking them, oh, my car's making, what do you think about a car? Or I was thinking about buying a new car, or my car's making weird noise. Or if they cooked, you can say, what do you think is the best way to cook this or that? And to make them feel, or ask them advice about, children and ask their advice is great. Also, if they're feeling really socially isolated, obviously you talking to them is vitally important, and making sure they know when you're going to talk to them every day, especially if you gave them some control about when you talk to them. That has been shown to be a lot healthier. But also try to get them to talk to other people. So even call upon their compassion and say, wow, well, how is your close friend, if they have friends who are living that they're close to, and say, I bet they haven't heard from a lot of people. They might be really sad and lonely. So could you help them out? And get them to call their contacts if they do, or if you have other family members, to expand it, because only having one or two social contacts we've seen is real risk for depression. People need more. Generally, the rule of thumb is more than 2 close people in their lives in order for it not to affect their mental health.
So that's interesting. I mean, it sounds intuitive about social support and having more friends and bringing people in. I hadn't really thought about having projects, because that's something you actually could do. You could, at least Amazon delivers. So maybe there's a really simple, I know I started making jewelry for my Facebook friends. I posted some of my necklaces, but it helps. It gives you a focus and it gives you a purpose. And so maybe you could talk to your seniors, or, for yourself, if you are a senior, think about what might be a project that you could learn that doesn't require going to a course or anywhere that you'd have to be in person, but that you could develop some kind of a project. Or I was thinking, if you had a lot of pictures, in the days that when I grew up and my kids grew up, we actually had pictures that we held in our hands. They weren't all on our iPhone, or you could print out pictures from your iPhone and maybe ask them to compile a scrapbook, or things that are kind of easy, like scrapbooking, or something that you really feel like you need, that would be useful. So a scrapbook, or I've read people asking about memory books, like can you put together a memory book of what you remember from growing up, or a video. That would be an easier thing, if you can just set them up so we can video them on their phones or have someone do it. Just kind of an oral history project. Sounds like some kind of project would be maybe a counteract depression as well, would you say?
Yes, that's excellent. A project that they enjoy doing. So so making sure that they like it, and it gives them purpose. So what you said about a memory project, because say that if they have grandchildren, for example, say, I think it's really important for the grandchildren to know about their family. So could you tell us about your parents and what they did? Or could you tell us about how you got your first job? Or what was your first car? What was that like? Or when did you see the first computer? Or just questions that they can answer, that they feel that they're offering. So this, and reinforce how important it is that this is something that you want to keep going. You want this to be a legacy, and that you want people to know about this history.
Yeah, and someone posted in the chat, actually it would be interesting if everybody could post in the chat if you think of an idea or something that might be fun to do. Carla posted, my senior mom and I are creating homemade crafts and plan to open an Etsy shop. It's really helped boost her morale and mine too. So I do think there's a value in just kind of having some hobby craft, something you can do that, you know, people really can do together, and or you can do one, I can do one. Someone else said make a slideshow of family pictures and then maybe have them narrate what they remember of the pictures. Or, you know, if all else fails, you could just have an interview every day by phone. I want, you know, I know my mom passed away and I never really did ask her about, like, what do you remember from your childhood? I don't have any, I mean, she might have mentioned it from time to time, but never in a way that it was documented. So I could just call her on the phone and I could type the answers on my computer or record her and just, you know, what do you remember about growing up? What was the hardest thing for you as a child? To actually have a living history, we kind of used to do that and we don't anymore. So that would be super cool. So I think we're getting some more people in the chat room talking of Let's See projects. Vivian says she's been learning new recipes from her older parents. That would be a good one as well. Just kind of, I feel that there's so many ways, and particularly in our culture, seniors are kind of like discarded and all we try to do is get plastic surgery and look younger versus being valued for all the knowledge and wisdom. And someone else mentioned guided journals that we actually really have. And now more than ever is a great time to try to capture all that wisdom. And for us, those of us who are seniors as well, to kind of figure out some ways to share our wisdom and knowledge and our reflections with others as well. So lots of good ideas, and I think that would definitely help with depression. Well, let me turn to a slightly different question, and then I see we have a chunk of questions that all involve kind of video games and virtual things. But this I thought was interesting, and our attendee says, I live with my grandparents, but they don't seem to be taking this very seriously. How do I let them know that following guidelines is important, especially for their specific population, without offending them? That's a good question.
That's a very good question. Well, what really you have to find out what motivates them. And I don't know these people specifically, but I do know that often what motivates grandparents is their grandchildren or their children. And so what you can do is put a spin on this. If you're worried about them exposing themselves, you could say, I'm really worried about being exposed myself. And so I want you to be safe, so we're all safe. So you make this about all of you. Just like in Japan, you know, with that whole Fukushima disaster, the older adults were saying, I will go in, we will clean this up. So they were focused on the health of the younger generation. And so if you have older people are saying, oh, it doesn't matter for me, you can say, yes, but it matters for me. Or I don't want to worry about you. What can we do to make it so basically it's not you, it's me, you know? So how can we make this healthy for you? So I'm not worried. I'm not worried for you. I'm not worried for me. To try to motivate them to know that everything they're doing it for the broader good and not just for themselves, because older people often are very compassionate and don't put themselves first.
That's great advice. Do you think, though, as it becomes really the new normal, there might be a little bit less resistance to it? I mean, at first it seems so odd to see people with masks. It almost freaked me out. I was like, now I'm just like, where's your mask? So do you think for older people, they'll get used to it too, or would they take longer to adjust to the new normal? I know a lot of times the older you get, the more, this is how we used to do it, this is the way it used to be, versus this is what's changed.
Yes, I think it's, it really depends on personality, right? And so, so older people, also it might be harder, especially if you have harder breathing problems anyway. It's not always that comfortable. And if you're huffing and puffing getting out of a chair, you know, just, it's harder to wear a mask when you're breathing hard. So So for some people, it might be harder than others, but getting them used to it in the new normal, reminding themselves, hey, we're wearing a lot of masks, but nothing compared to 1918. Wow, they really wore masks back then. And talk about how it was pretty normal, pretty, a normal thing in this country in the past. So kind of normalizing the experience.
And let me just interject kind of back to what we were talking about before in terms of activities. Somebody shared that she bought her grandmother a plant, and her mother has gotten really into nurturing the plant and even picking off flowers to share with others. So I know, I mean, I'm not an aging scholar, but I know the famous plant study. Maybe you could just share a little recap of that study with everyone. It
Yes,
was
this
kind
was a
of
study.
seminal.
This was a study done back in the 70s where they gave people in different levels of the nursing home, so either no plants or plants that someone else took care of completely. So nurses would come in and water the plants for them, or plants that they had to take care of. And what they found is that people who had to take care of the plant did better and were healthier. So there was another follow-on study where they had undergraduates visit people in nursing care facilities. And in one, the younger person set the agenda of when they would visit. And then in the other, the older person said, I mean, it wasn't like, oh yeah, come at 8 a.m. or something when the younger person wouldn't want to, but the older people could choose when the younger people went to visit them. And so when older people had more control, so they had a plant to take care of, or they had some say in the visitation, when they felt like they were controlling and had a reason behind their actions, they were healthier. And I mean, the plant's great too, because nature, we know that people in hospitals, if they look outside and see nature, they recover faster and they're healthier than people who don't. We know that older people report nature as a positive experience in their lives more often than people in their 30s and 40s. So they're more likely to appreciate nature and their sunsets and the flowers in their gardens more than people in their 30s and 40s and 50s do. So we know with age, nature is seen as a very positive experience. So plant's good. Older people also have benefited from pets. And in Japan, they even have a stuffed pet that looks like a seal. I don't know why a seal. And there's been some really good response in nursing homes for people who can't have a real pet because of allergies or just it's too complex or too much to take care of. But these pets, for especially people with cognitive problems in hospitals, I was skeptical. I admit, I was skeptical that basically a stuffed animal that made purring noises would make a big difference in their health. And I can't deny the results of other people's research showing that actually it's good to have these. So older people benefit from pets, really live pets too. They benefit from plants. They benefit from controlling the environment in any way they can.
I was going to actually ask you about pets because I know my dog's gotten a lot of love since I've been home. And I would think if I were living alone, I like pets, but having a pet would be really helpful. I wonder if you're like older people enjoy pets, but they maybe can't manage one or own one. But if the children or the grandchildren had pets and they could say, my pet, can you watch my dog for 2 hours today? So they didn't have to feed or walk or anything like that. But just my mom used to come down. She used to always, she spent the whole time sitting on the couch petting my dog going, oh, such a pretty doggy, and she, it's the touch too, because that's the other thing. We can talk to people and see them on Zoom, but we don't touch people anymore, and so that's something that's really missing. And actually on that note, we had an interesting question, which is, brings up a great point. I think it was something we said before, but it's still related. How do I talk to my kids about why they can't hug and interact as much with their grandparents right now?
Yeah, so explain it to children. It really depends on the age of the child, but talking about how we have just explaining the importance that there's depending on the age of the child. If it's a really young child, saying there's a really bad flu out there, and sometimes you can get the flu and you don't even know you have it, but older people can get it from us. And so we have to be really careful because you know how we wash our hands before dinner, even even what's on our hands can be perfectly fine for us, but they might get sick from it. So you don't want to scare your children unnecessarily, but you just want to say that we need to be, we need to really protect grandma and grandpa. And, there's a really bad flu going around. So.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And I'm really wondering when the kids go back to school, how that's going to work. But I think they're very adaptable is the thing about kids. And so when they realize they have to wear a mask and they, have to manage their personal space, they'll probably be pretty good at it. Well, let me change to a slightly different topic because we've gotten a lot of questions about video games and cognitive games. And so let me just read a couple of them and you can kind of organize a set of answers. One is there are cognitive training games that one can play and improve one's performance with practice, but do the skills developed in these games help in performing real world tasks? Maybe we can start with that one, so I won't load you up.
That's an excellent question, and that's one that is highly debated among the scientists. And so you could probably find another scientist saying, yes, absolutely. Other people saying it's very specific to that game, so you'll get better at that game, but it might not transfer or generalize, as we say, to anything outside that game. What we generally have found is that a game where you're learning something new and you have to use your memory is the best and will transfer to other experiences. So if it's any type of memory game, or you're learning a new strategy, or you're learning a new virtual environment, and so you remember where something's located in your virtual world. So something like that is much better for the brain than, I love crossword puzzles, I really love them, but they do not include like learning something new. So for example, a crossword puzzle is not as useful as learning a virtual environment and being able to remember it.
I know I was a little bit unhappy when I was talking with Craig Stark because he's a leading researcher in this area. And he was telling me that solitaire doesn't help because I love solitaire. I'm obsessed with playing solitaire online. And I thought, well, you have to think on you got to remember which ones you had. And he goes, nope. It has to be actual interactive, a new skill. At least that was his take on the research that. And I know a lot of seniors, when I used to fly on planes, I'd see everybody around me playing solitaire. So that doesn't work.
And solitaire it can be very soothing and relaxing, but you think you could probably do it while you're kind of being distracted on a plane or distracted watching television, right? It's kind of a soothing thing you can do without even thinking. You can look at it and look away. So it's that easiness of it that might soothe you, but it's not going to make you think. And it's the making you think and problem solve and remember and kind of kind of focus and see what's wrong. Those strategies will help your brain, whereas soothing might help your emotions, but as far as keeping you sharp, not as much.
Well, and I know, for example, bridge, I know a lot of seniors play bridge. My mom used to play bridge every day till she was about 95. And there has been research, because I was curious about it, that shows that playing bridge actually helps you with cognitive acuity.
Well, bridge, it's very much a strategy game, and you have to kind of shift your strategy depending on how it's going, and you're making decisions all the time. You're also playing with other people. And so you're actually something that's very cognitively challenging that we don't often think about is social interactions. So when you talk to someone, you have to keep them interested, notice when they're losing interest, follow what they're saying, generate conversation. And so actually social engagement is something that requires a lot more cognitive workout than we think. And so that's actually something that is also like a book club, not where everyone's sitting around going, love it, love it, love it. But if people are really talking about it and making an argument or trying to be persuasive, that's actually something that takes a lot of work. And so it's good for the brain.
That could be something really easy to arrange when we're talking about different activities, where you could, if you had a group of 5 to 10 seniors, they could get together and pick a book they're going to read and then go online, and have a Zoom, assuming they can use technology, and have conversations about the book. And that's easy to do from home on Zoom. You don't need a lot of fancy equipment or anything like that. So that's another activity.
Right. And for people who don't love reading, it could be, you know, watching a game and then talking about it afterwards, like, you know, arguing about who played what, or, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a book, but it could be analyzing whatever it is.
Great advice. Well, related to that, one of our attendees said, video games sounds like a nice idea. Have you found a genre of video games, or even a specific one that you found seniors respond to well? Or is there a resource? Is there somewhere we can go to find like senior appropriate games? Because I don't think we're going to play. I don't even know what kids play anymore, but I look at it, I'm like, I'm not killing 5 people and blowing them up.
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I know the research has looked at specific games, and so they've actually had older people play like Minecraft, which is a game that, you know, if the children could teach the grandparents, that would be something. And people have talked about using Wii, because some of the Wii games include being physically fit or just moving your arms or balance, and so they've used that in research. But again, thinking about Craig Stark's research, when you choose a game, it's not something like Angry Birds, which you're trying to throw something somewhere. It's something where you're actually learning something and memorizing it. And so it's not like Centipede, but it's something that requires thought and decisions and memory.
Well, have people come out with video games specifically for seniors yet?
You know, I don't know. I'm sure
I'm gonna Google it.
Right. I'm sure they have, because it's hard to believe they haven't.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem like an untapped market if you could have kind of easy to use, fun, not killing people and blowing things up. I have no interest in doing that. I don't think most seniors want to. So that would be a really interesting, you know, thing to kind of think about, and innovative. And we should all look and see what there is, because my guess is there would, or maybe like AARP rate some video games for how much they contribute to cognitive acuity. Some of the points that's raised in the question, how difficult they are to learn. You know, you don't want to overly frustrate people where it has a bad impact instead of a good impact. So,
and as I said, there's been a lot of companies that have said that it really helps your acuity, but there's been some criticism about some of those companies where they have games that are not focused on kind of memory or building on your memory.
That's something that's.
I was just going to say that something that's not a game, but also kind of builds on memory, and it's fantastic. I would imagine it being tough during this time, but playing a musical instrument is supposed to be one of the best things you can do to keep your brain active. If you're 40s or 50s or 60s plus, so if someone has musical instrument and they want to build on their skills or take it up again and learn a new song, that uses so many different aspects of your brain, your motor cortex, your occipital to look at it, remembering patterns, memorizing songs and movements. That's another great area for your brain.
Okay, well, one of our viewers very diligently posted a website that has great games for seniors. So we've posed a problem and solved it within 10 minutes, which is great. But that's really good to know. I mean, and so maybe a way to teach technology to seniors, or to start to learn technology, doing something fun rather than trying to get really frustrated. Well, as we're kind of winding up here, let me ask one last question that seems like a very good kind of note to end on, and it's really looking forward. The question is, what changes for seniors do you anticipate in nursing homes and in their lives in general moving forward? So it's a very specific question to nursing homes, but it's a much broader question. And what, you know, now we realize they're such an at-risk group, and it's highlighting some of the challenges and financial health, social support, etc. Do you see things changing for the better moving forward in any way?
It's a really interesting question. I saw, and of course this is determined by policy, but I saw that they're requiring testing in senior facilities and people who work at these facilities, and that's fantastic to really understand and keeping people healthy and protected. So a lot more testing in these facilities. There are generally, you have to pay more for a single room, and a lot of people have roommates. And so that is going to be really interesting to see if nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities, if they continue to have shared bedrooms, or if they start moving into each person having their own room, because that's I can see that becoming an issue.
Do you think this might kind of make us kind of reflect on seniors in our society and how we care for them, and maybe change the kind of way we view them as burdens, and view them more as assets and as resources in some way? Or do you think we'll just go back to business as usual?
I really hope so, because prior to this pandemic, people have gotten healthier and living longer and longer, healthier than we have. And our country is really, so there's more older people today than there ever have been. We've created a new group. People have always grown old before, but never in the numbers we're seeing today. If you look at Japan, it'll be pretty soon over 30% of the people are over 65 in that country. And a lot of them are very healthy and productive and really paving the way for the younger people. So we wanted to really move age into just being a number, as we said before. I mean, what does age really represent? Since there's so much variation. And the news makes me worried that people think of an us versus them. At some point, someone becomes, quote, old, and then that changes the game, instead of, this is a fluid experience. This is something, health is something we manage across our entire lives. This is not something like you turn a switch at 65 and all of a sudden you have 2 chronic conditions. Most of our health is really, we see it start uncovering in our midlife, in our 40s. So I'm hoping that the pandemic doesn't move us towards an us versus them, that people will understand that the majority of older people don't live in nursing homes. The majority of people who are 65 are living in their homes. And the majority of people don't have any cognitive problems, that they are healthy and active and vital. It's just that the fragile people within that age group that we have to be really careful about.
Well, and I know we were seeing even before the pandemic, because I know we work in our school with some of the larger home builders in Orange County and in the US, and there was a trend towards these kind of multi-generational housing arrangements where there was an in-law apartment or a parent apartment. And when I was talking with some of the builders, they were saying that people are realizing that people live longer, they live healthier, but maybe they want to be connected and not live by themselves and have to mow the lawn and whatnot. So maybe people will appreciate family a little more, and that trend will continue, we hope. But it's really important, just to wrap up, that I think your final comment is one we should leave everybody on, because a number of people participating today are probably very young people, but you'll all get there. You're going to be a senior someday, even though you think it will never happen. And so Susan's advice was that really healthy lifestyle begins very early, and their habits that you develop and ways of living that continue on and continue to buffer you from some of the negative effects of aging. So if I had to give advice looking back to people, I'd say start as young as possible living a healthy lifestyle. That's going to be good for a lot of things: exercise, eat healthy, socialize, have a purpose, be engaged. It's not rocket science to have a healthy lifestyle. And the earlier you start, the greater the impact will be for you. So it's kind of good advice. I don't know, do you want to give some closing advice? It's really your webinar.
No, I think that's excellent. And that health is something that it's not too early, and it's something you have to do every single day. So these are steps you do every single day in all those dimensions. So
yeah, that's really great.
It's a choice, and it's an activity that you have to devote your attention and time to.
And we have to live up to our reputation as Californians, right? We're the healthy state, The only healthier state, I think, is Colorado, where I swear they test your body fat before you're allowed to move in, at least in the front range. So thank you all so much for participating today. We hope you've learned a lot. We will post our talk our chat before, and this is being recorded. We'll post this as well. I know that our communications team, Han and Vivian and Mimi, have worked tirelessly to put these together, and they'll be in connection with you. So someone said, great, they're going to call their grandma right now. That's a good takeaway. If nothing else, everybody go home and call their parents, or call an older friend, or call their grandma, or do small things that can actually make a really big difference. So thank you so much, Susan, and thank you all for coming. We've really enjoyed this. Have a great day. I was going to say have a great weekend, but I realize it's only Thursday, so have a great day.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.